My name's Paul Harper, for those of you who don't know me. I'm co-chair of PIPS, which stands for Parents in Partnership Stockport, and we're the local parent carer forum that works with Stockport organisations, both statutory and voluntary and independent, to give them views about provision of services and support for children and young people with disabilities and additional needs. And we've been meeting Stockport Council, certainly, and other organisations locally for quite some years now, and working together. And it's our keynote to work in partnership with professionals, to work jointly in support of our children and young people with disabilities and additional needs. This evening's sort of genesis goes a long way back. It goes back to some work that was happening certainly in Stockport last year under Helen Sanderson Associates, who are represented here tonight in the audience, to talk about what was working and what was not working in Stockport for families with disabled and additional needs children and young people. And most latterly, it's been taken up in the making choices, having control work that Stockport has invited PIPS to serve on as a parent carer voice. But also that spawned a huge range of other information and opportunities to look at this process of co-production. So we've got a timeline behind me, 0 to 25. You can see that in the line at the top, this is the experience that we expect all our children and young people to undertake, both from birth into nursery or other kinds of play school provision, across primary schools, secondary schools, into continued learning and into work and adult life. As a parent, we would expect the best for all our children. Certainly when our first was born, who's someone without disabilities, we expected to be able to provide the best for that person. But when our second was born and we learned that they had a disability, we also wanted to provide the best for them. Down at the bottom, a very busy diagram, beautifully produced, but lots of choices, lots of opportunities, and of course we want the best opportunities for all our children and young people, not just a reduced set according to disability or additional need. We want the best that it can be. And so we want to think about how we can make those best choices for our children and young people at every stage of their growth and development. But it's not always like that, is it, Jenny? I wonder if you could come up and talk about your experiences of how you were able to plan or not plan for your child as she grew up.
Well, I became a parent carer 23 years ago, and it was a very high caring role with very little knowledge or support on services or about education, what was available for my daughter. It was only really through attending the child development unit on a weekly basis and through speaking to other parents and about what they'd learnt and what I'd learnt, and in sharing those experiences and knowledge about different things that were available to us. Something as simple as the family fund, for instance, on reading the literature at that time, through grieving and still coming to terms with my daughter's disability, did I think she was actually severely disabled. So I poo-pooed it, if you like, but it was through the encouragement of the other parents saying, well, let's go for it, let's, the price of a stamp, let's apply for it, and we were actually given it. It was then that we learnt about disability living allowance again. So it was that you'd sit up at night at 12 o'clock exhausted, trying to fill this form in that took over a week to probably do, not knowing if I correctly filled it in properly or not, and again submitted that. But it went on to this, I don't want to really go into an awful lot of things, but again it was the statement in procedure again. Nobody told me about that. My daughter was 4 at the time. It was only that I picked up a file at the child development unit, did I learn and ask the questions, what was statementing about. I then obviously proceeded with that and actually learnt that my daughter could have actually attended Valley School 2 years prior to that. The next stage of that was actually attending that school was that I was called into school on Thursday afternoon to be told that my daughter was going to be excluded on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. The education department didn't give her a one-to-one support because she was showing autism and challenging behaviours. A lack of communication with her peers in her group was that she was displaying behaviours that the school didn't like. That escalated into then the Together Trust having to get involved and actually help and support the school, implement and work with us as parents and the school on her IEP. And then at 11, she wasn't given any school or placement within Stockport. There was no places at the Heaton School. She actually had to stay on there at Valley for another year. So I would think the role of a key worker or one person I could have picked the telephone up to, spoken to get any advice on services, education, social, etc. would have been absolutely invaluable to me and my family. Thank you.
Jenny, before you sit down, just a little bit about the key worker. Tell us a little bit about what you imagine that person might be able to do.
To me, it would have been nice because I had so much contact in the early days of the Child Development Unit, if I'd have had one key person that I could have contacted or emailed just to get advice, who was completely detached from all services, that if you like could think outside the box, that I could open up to, know that they would keep that enclosed and that private if I wished them to, and to actually guide me and support me, advise me, because other professionals didn't do that. I would ask questions, they wouldn't answer me. And that was very poor in the respect of that left me as a 25-year-old mum with 2 young children not knowing where to go, who to talk to, because the extended family didn't understand, friends didn't understand, so it's a matter of me again just out seeking parents out there to get that help and support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that we've come up with in talking to parents and carers is this concept of the key worker. It's not a new concept, it's not something that's absolutely novel, it's something that's been talked about for quite some time, but someone who's able to work with the family to think about what's needed, when it's needed, and how it might be delivered, and to provide that kind of advice that the family can call in and trust and rely on from time to time. This is not a magic solution. That person would be thinking about, okay, here are a set of choices, but each of them carries a consequence. So we're looking at someone to enable families to make informed choices, rather than, as Jenny was suggesting, sometimes having to play catch up and think about their choices after, in fact, they should have been thinking about that before. So brings us to the point of assessment. Anjali, would you come and tell us about your experiences of assessment?
My daughter was diagnosed at 34 weeks gestation. That was 3 weeks before she was born. Now, by the age of 1, she was actually under the care of 25 different professionals. So we had to tell our story over and over again. It wasn't a nice story, and it became very negative, and can actually change your feelings towards your child. So I think having to tell your story once, and the idea of a single assessment is absolutely amazing. Okay. Thank you.
So with the single assessment that might be tied to, in future, some kind of education, health and care plan, as we know nationally is being suggested now, that would enable a family to feel much more empowered, to see clearly and in writing exactly what might lie ahead and how they can best prepare for it. So let's imagine, roll the years on slightly now and think, okay, we have a child that's got their education, health and care plan, they've been through nursery, they're coming into primary school. What might this look like? Well, hopefully with some rich information about what is possible, and some information as well about the consequences of choice, parents, and as the child grows up, the young person, able to make much more informed choices. And parents and carers are telling us that certainly during the school years, it would be great to have a choice of school. Certainly when we went through choices of schools, we saw a lot of provision, very different, and we had to make a clear choice about what we thought might be best for our son. But what parents are telling us actually is that sometimes the choice limits the kind of services you get. Sometimes occupational therapy, speech and language and other services are not always available when and where the child needs it. So we need to understand that choice. And of course, School is about partnership. It's about professionals, parents and the young person working together. With a personal budget that might be available, then further opportunities become possible. So maybe contributing some finance in order to buy in some support, or maybe work with the school in the appointment of support, and to co-produce, to co-plan and to co-work this so that the family, including the child, are more confident about the support that's needed. And of course the support doesn't necessarily have to cost. If you're talking about buddying and circles of friends, that's a really vital area of support for children and young people that doesn't actually cost and has immense value in terms of social empowerment and feeling part of that school community. So we roll on and we look at other aspects of learning. We think about college opportunities, work opportunities, again thinking about planning, changing the plan, thinking about preparation for the next stage. And remember, we're looking now for most children and young people about learning until 18, and we're having to break new ground in the very near future about making sure there is enough opportunity for people to move into adulthood readily prepared. Kevin, come and talk to us a little bit about that next stage as we move towards adulthood and beyond.
Yeah, child's reaching an age where hopefully you're looking at them possibly moving out the family home. That's a whole load of troubles that start developing there. Again, you've got the one person that you can still call on to give you the examples. Draw on other people's experiences to let you know what is possible, rather than always being led down the same road of what is currently there. I'm reminded of the NASA spent a few $1 million perfecting a pen that will write in space. Do you know how difficult it is to write in space with a pen? That's millions were spent on that. The Russians gave their cosmonauts pencils. Cost a couple of quid for a box of 12. So it's not always about money, it's about the creativity, it's thinking it through. I'd like to build up a close circle of support around my daughter Amy. She's not got any friends in her life at all. What I want her to have is her own place to live. Again, it's looking to housing, lots of different possible provision, and just broadening it out for people to let them know there are a lot of different possibilities there.
Thank you very much. So we're looking then at a possibility where people can go confidently and securely into adulthood. That's bound to be a positive, both for that young person and for the community that they are a part of. Now, we've said a fair bit about parents already, and we've talked about them basically being there behind their child and young person, but the graphic talks about parents in other capacities as well. Sharon, can you come and talk to us about family leadership,
yeah,
and how that might change things?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about family leadership because, as you know, Stockport have already invested in family leadership, and in other parts of the country it's going on. So what we were thinking was about parents becoming planners. It's becoming very successful now because people, and as you know, parents and carers trust, and they go to other parents and they find them very knowledgeable. So I was thinking about also that they could also facilitate circles of support and even be involved in person-centred reviews. And to be honest, parents can be involved all the way around, but it'd be about choice, so that they'd have a choice of going to anybody, really. So it might be professionals, or they might go to parent carers. And I think with it being successful in a few areas at the moment, we could lead the way in Stockport in this, because we've already got a brilliant base and we've seen the benefits now of having family leadership.
Thank you very much. So to sum up, we've presented to you a vision of how things could be in Stockport. We agree that it's a vision, but we very definitely don't think that it's idealistic. We think it's perfectly achievable, but it will take a lot of effort and a lot of time, and clearly we can't achieve all of it at once. But the purpose of this evening is first of all to share that vision with you, and secondly to ask you for your comments and your responses, and thirdly to say, are you willing to take those first steps with us to make this happen locally in Stockport? We think it's entirely possible, and we're determined to work with you step by step to enable it to happen. And we're very interested in hearing what you've got to say about those kinds of things. Thank you.